Welcome back everyone to Jface Games. Today we are talking about the game. We're not going into any particular other board games or RPGs. We're just going to be walking through what I have currently as the board game, as the RPG system. And I'm actually going to put a link in the, as Matt Cole says, in the doobly-doo, in the comment section down below, where you will be able to come to this page and click through and hopefully then leave me some comments. Now, not all of this is done. Once again, if you saw one of the videos earlier, I talked about the 5 mechanic system. That 5 mechanic system being player creation, sort of player combat, monster combat, DM combat, downtime, world, factions, macro politics, etc., and then social micro interactions, role playing. Downtime, these 3 down here, there's nothing there, so don't worry about going there. Most of everything currently is in this section, the player combat section, so that's where you want to go. And then once again, this is just my sort of like take home in terms of what am I trying to accomplish with this game. All right, so let's take a peek and let's take a little walkthrough of this player character creation section. So when you come to this page, just if you're not familiar with Notion, when you click on this, it's going to come up as a smaller page. If you want to open it as a bigger page, you can just click here. Boop, now you're in the bigger page. Okay, so let's walk through this. There is a nice table of contents that'll click down. It's a little click down, and you can click through if you want to kind of skip around. But we'll talk about sort of the major highlights right now for what I'm looking at for this game. All right. So first off, if you're familiar with some of the videos we've made in this series, some of these concepts are going to be familiar because hopefully we're building this game together as we go through stuff. So the idea being that they're going to have attributes. The player's going to have attributes. They're probably going to have feats and powers, and they're going to have skills, right? So those are the 3 main things they're going to have. Feats / powers. There might be a combo word for that. It might just be powers, I don't know. Attributes and skills. That's it. That's what they've got, okay? Now, when it comes to point buying, currently, I'm playing a little, this might be a little crazy, but this might be that risk-reward component, but currently, my thought for character creation is that you will have a total amount of points that you're going to then be able to spend at level 1 that for your attributes, for your powers, and for your skills, and whatever you have left over is going to be what makes up your hit points or your stress in this system. Now that might be a terrible idea, and there might be a base stress that everyone starts out with already, but I like the idea of I can make myself a glass cannon, I can go all in and have some amazing attributes and feats, but I also mean that I don't take stress very well, or I don't have a lot of stamina, or whatever that sort of ends up being in terms of stress stamina, because I don't want to do hit points. I'm kind of over hit points, and I want to do something a little different. So let's walk through some of these things. So attributes we've talked about before, with the idea being that your attributes are not strength, dex, charisma, etc. Your attributes are actually, I'm a defender, I'm a leader, I'm a striker, or I'm a controller. This is very similar to 4E, their class categorization. And then there would be a final category, which is sort of more this like mystical powers, supernatural, magical, which is sort of an homage to Open Legend, and how Open Legend, it had its attribute list, and then there was the supernatural attribute list attached to it. What I like about this is that it means that if you want to be a magic user, you can be, but it takes, your magic powers are going to be really good, but it means that you have to dip into this magical area, right? You have to spend attributes into this. Whereas someone who's just melee, they just want to be a defender and striker. They just want to get in there and mix it up. They can do that, and they're still going to be great because how the feat system and the powers hopefully will be built out, okay? Now, throughout this, you're going to see little notes, but the idea being that these stats are either going to be D2 base, and then when you put in attribute points towards them, how many attribute points it takes to level from one to the next is to be determined, but the idea being that you go D2, D3, D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, okay? We'll come back to that in terms of why that's important, why that's nice, but that's very much like Savage Worlds in that sense, okay? Skills, 13th Age, I love it. I can't get over that skill system, so I'm gonna use that skill system in the sense that you pick backgrounds and you put skill points into those backgrounds. And therefore I could be a blacksmith too. So if a skill If the DM says this is what's happening, and I think that my background in being a blacksmith is going to help me in that scenario, then that's when I would use my background for blacksmith and my skill rank of it being a 2. Now, already, this means we're dealing with multiple systems, right? Meaning that when I'm in combat, this is what I'm going to be rolling and using, something along this lines. But when I'm doing a skill check, I might be just doing a D20 and using these pluses. Why? Because I think that skill checks for me are, because they're so on the fly. Like skill checks, you're making up on the fly. You're just dabbling, right? You're spitballing. So I like the idea of a D20 with its 5% increments and very easy to come up with a DC for that on the fly, right? Because I think that a D100 system is too, like, there was a great video that Matt Colville did on the why a D20 is so great and why a D100 is a little bit too, it's too much knowledge for the player. Like it's too finite, whereas the D20, the way he described it's very poetic in essence. So watch his description, but there's something about the D20 and tricking our brain, and we like that degree of error of 5%. It's a little nicer, okay? So we're utilizing that system, all right? Proficiency we'll get into. It's probably gonna mean feats, right? When you go into your proficiencies, this is gonna be either feats or it might be skills that you're putting into it directly. I like the idea of maybe pluses and minuses, very simple pluses and minuses, +1, +2. The Cypher system does a good job with their sort of inherent proficiency where it actually makes your effort that you're putting into things a little bit easier, right? So still working out what proficiency might look like, but I definitely think it's probably going to be involved in the feat system in terms of I take a feat to be better at weapons of certain types, or I take a feat to be able to use these things. And that might affect the dice I'm using, right? Because say I'm a leader D2, great, but if I now take a feat to become proficient in an axe, maybe now I get a D3 with that roll. We'll see, we'll see. That one's still gonna be played around with a little bit. When we get into actions, you've got attacks, moves, special, reaction, and RP action. The main one here we'll talk about is the attack action. I covered this in a recent video, and I think this is the system I'm moving forward with. Some people commented on it and really liked it, and so I think we're gonna go ahead and go with it, which is the idea that a monster is gonna have 3 different target numbers. The target, or 3 different numbers you're trying to hit. The target number, the bloodied number, and the death number, right? Those numbers are what you're trying to reach on your dice roll. So if I'm a D8 dice roll and I'm rolling a D8, I'm trying to get the number necessary, right? There's an example down here, which this would show that this is the total hit value of the monster. This is its target number, its bloodied number, and its death number. So if I were to roll a D8 +1, because I'm proficient in axes, so I get a +1, and I roll a D8 because I have striking D8 or something up here, it shows like an example of why I got to D8 +1. So now I roll a D8 +1, and depending on what I roll, shows you what the result might be. If I roll a 5, that means I hit the target number, which means I've now done a hit, and that monster's hit value goes from 10 to 9. If I rolled a 7, that means I got above its bloodied number, which means I immediately take half its hits off, right? So it goes, and it's rounded up, I believed. And so if I did that, it would go from a 10 to a 5, if that's where it was at. What I haven't determined yet is it half of whatever they're at currently, or is it half of their original number? Meaning that if a monster's been hit, if this guy was hit 3 times and now he's at 7, and I did this, is it half of 7 or is it half of 10? Does he go to 2 or does he go to 3? You know, to be determined. And then finally, if you can get the death number, if you can get above the death number, then you automatically kill that monster, slay it outright. So there's no crits in this system. There's no exploding dice or crits, because the beauty of this is that you feel like you get a crit, obviously, if you get a bloody number or a death number. What's nice about this system is you can have rapid monster creation. I can very easy think about like a kaiju, where its target number might be a 1. Yeah, you can hit a kaiju, you know, you just slap it, right? but its total hit value might be like 50, and its bloodied number might be like 30, right? So how am I going to get up to being able to roll a 30? Well, that might be a combination of all sorts of things. I might have to use a ballista for all I know. That's a huge number, but there might be crazy feats that are eventually that you're able to unlock that give you bonuses. Effort that you're able to put into a swing. We'll talk about that in a second. So considerations here, feats and powers might increase the dice temporarily for just an attack. You might be able to get multiple attacks in a round. You might be able to add bonuses, add additional hits on a hit, meaning that if I hit with my axe, instead of doing 1, maybe I just did 3, I get like +2. So there's different things that feats can manipulate with this attack system, okay? And then there's just some other considerations here. This is one consideration that maybe if you decide to... Oh, the idea being that the way a round works is similar to Pathfinder 2, that I get 3 actions on my turn. So I could go attack, 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 or attack, move, move, or etc., right? Now, if I used one of my actions to perform one attack, I do my normal attack. So let's talk about this guy who's got a d8 + 1. If I attack, attack, move, I can do a d8 + 1, a d8 + 1, move. This consideration here is maybe you can get more attacks in one action at the risk of accuracy. So maybe I could have this person attack twice on this action and then move, move. But by attacking twice here, they now have to roll a d6 + 1 and a d6 + 1, right? That's sort of, I think Savage World did that in terms of they stepped down the dice the more times you attacked, right? So if that person then tried to attack 3 times with this action, maybe they do a d4 + 1, a d4 + 1, a d4 + 1. What I like about this is you might start to be able to finally feel like a badass when you're fighting a horde of goblins. And those goblins all have a target number of 2. So now I can be running through this place with 2 run actions, but still attack 3 times as I'm going, because I'm rolling a d4 + 1, a d4 + 1, d4 + 1, right? Now maybe there's a limit based on your level how many times you can split an action up, but at this point in time, I like the idea, because I want cinematics. Once again, I want this to be memorable cinematics, and it all comes down to the DM, just make the target number higher. If you want to make it a little more challenging for them and they got to focus, higher target number. Give that goblin all of a sudden a shield. There's the goblin with a shield wall. And it's like, oh crap, higher target number. Moving, I think the only major thing here in moving that I'm considering is whether you're wearing light, medium, or heavy armor, that all of a sudden the number of movement spaces you have changes. From 7 squares if you've got no or 0 arm, or no or light armor, medium is 6 squares, and then 5 is you've got heavy armor on, you've got a little bit less. That's a consideration at this point in time. I still like the idea of stepping versus moving. That'll probably come into play, that everything can have an attack of opportunity with a reaction, similar to 4th edition D&D, that you have a stride and a step or whatever it was. So you could step or you can move. So that still falls into play. This is, in essence, dudes on the map type of movement, and there's going to be theater of the mind type of movement. Just haven't written it out yet. Still thinking about that. Basic special actions. I wanted it to feel cool to still want to pump up different of your basic attributes. If you're a defender, leader, controller, or striker, I wanted there to be a basic action for each of those that feels like that's good to have, right? So aiding or helping. Instead of it being like a skill check of some sort like in 5th edition, aiding and helping is based on your leadership die, right? So if I'm trying to help someone in combat, and I'm trying to do something to give them a better chance, the basic action of that comes from, I have to roll my leadership die. And and the example I gave here is maybe I gotta get a 3 or 3+ or, on the die roll. So for someone who has a D4, that's a little bit trickier. If someone's got a D8 because they are a leader, it's a lot more second nature, that they can spend one of their actions to give someone a +1 roll. No problem, right? I thought that controlling die could do your push, pull, grapple, trip. So now if you have someone who's a defender, maybe they have to go a little bit into controlling. Caveat would be that there will be feats available that can do some of these things, right? You might, as a defender, have a shield push feat later on that you could spend points into. Now, the choice, the risk reward becomes, do I keep pumping defender and not worry about control at all, but that means I have to take those feats to allow myself to be good at that kind of stuff, or do I bump up my controller so that in my defender I can go more taunting type things? You know, that might be a decision tree, right? For defending, I thought the idea of being that you can change the type of dice that's being used as a defense. So as a heads up, the idea currently is that this is going to be more of Cypher in terms of the players are going to have to roll their own defenses. So the DM doesn't have to roll any dice. So the player's going to have to roll their defense, and so the defender might be able to, if you're defending a friend, you're allowing them to roll a higher dice possibly. And then called shot or disarm possibly for the striker. I don't know if this is going to work yet, but I thought that made sense, that whenever you want to do some sort of called shot or disarm, that's more of a striker dice because it's that precision accuracy. So these are some current thoughts behind those basic special actions. Reaction, that's probably going to be, I don't know, this is in the wrong spot. This should be down here. But reaction, that's going to be, in essence, you're taking an attack on someone if they try and do certain things, right? You're going to have different kinds of reactions besides just attacking also. And then an RP action, we talked about once in one of our videos, and that still needs to be flushed out. The final real thing to talk about, I think it's the final real thing, the final real thing to talk about here is effort and grit. So I like the Cypher System's concept of effort, where I can try to pump more into my ability to hit or succeed, right? So the idea here being that I would use from whatever my stamina pool is, which is technically also my hit points. So whatever I've got left over at the end of my character creation, that's my stamina, which I am going to be actually using to possibly fuel my dice rolls to do better, right? So the number at which you can pump into something, there's probably going to be a cap, just like in the Cypher system, where there's a cap of how much effort I can put in. But there could be a, I'm going to put in here, the example is, I've got that D8 plus 1 axe user again, and he decides to spend 2 stamina in order to get 2 effort. So now he's rolling a D8 plus 3. Hopefully he can get the bloodied number or the death number and, you know, take out that orc chieftain. Now, grit level, this is the one I need most people to talk about, because in the buddies I've talked to about this, there was controversy. Grit level, the idea here being that your grit level is initially 1 at first level, right? And your grit level is how much effort you can actually spend on this dice roll or attack. So at level 1, my grit level is 1 at base. However, I hate the idea of misses in these kind of games because it just sucks. When you miss a dice roll, it's kind of like wah, wah. And some games have come up with different systems for, oh, you still do some damage. Like Open Legend, on a miss, you can still do like 3 damage, because that's a high damaging game in general when you actually roll the dice. So on a miss, you still do 3 damage, or you do some sort of boon, or other stuff kind of happens on a miss. What I thought is that on a miss, however much you missed by, meaning that if the target number was a 5 and I rolled a 2, however much I missed by is how much my grit level is increased until my next attack. So, if I'm in that scenario, so I think the example here I have is, say the target number is a 7 and I rolled a 1. Well, now the difference between that is a 6, so my grit level would go from a 1 to a 7. The implications of this means that I can now roll and almost certainly hit this target if I wanted to. I could go +7 for my attack, right? I could, or if I have a D8 plus 1 normally, I could go a D8 plus 8 and just go all out. The problem being that that means I am reducing my stamina by 7 in order to do that. And that's the risk-reward thing that I think could be awesome. The fact that I could say, you know what? I'm ending this fight. And I swing, and if I hit and I kill him, great. If I miss, I'm draining myself. You know, I'm putting a lot of effort into this stuff. And so my stamina has now dropped, and now I am at that much more risk for, you know, getting taken out of the fight. So that's where we're at right now. There's a lot of other concepts that I want to throw into this. There's going to be modules. Already I'm starting to put things down here in terms of modules, because I want to do, in essence, what D&D Next was initially sort of like trying to do, which is there's going to be a base game, and then there's going to be modules that you just add to it. And I'm going to build it all out now so that people who want to just do the base game Theater of the Mind can, and it's easy. And I want to try and make sure that it's not math heavy. And that was one of the things someone said about that grit level concept, is maybe it was a little too math heavy. But I don't think it will be. I think it could be fun. So anyways, let me know what you think. Leave comments down below. There's going to be a link to this page so you can get to it. So I'll talk to you soon.